For this lesson, I want to introduce you to Canvas. Now, I don't predominantly use this on any of my edits, but it's worth noting because I know a lot of you are creating edits for TikTok or just really quick edits using CapCut. So the very first thing you want to do is identify a particular clip on your timeline and ensure it is your main timeline. What do I mean by your main timeline? I mean the timeline that is above the audio. This is categorized as the main timeline. You can see the edit cover button here, and it is the first part of your timeline. The reason why I say this is because any clips that may be on different timelines within the sequence will not allow you to have this particular function. So over here, I've got the 300 Leonidas clip, and previously I scaled into this clip 430%. This may not necessarily be the direction you want to take your edit down. So if I was to redo or reset this position and size just simply by clicking this button over here on the right hand side, I now have the original file set within the 9:16 aspect ratio. It doesn't look all that good. You have a huge black bar on either side of the image, but what you can do if you'd like is scroll down, and at the bottom of your adjustment panel with the clip selected, you can click on Canvas, and what this basically allows you to do is apply a blur or a background to that particular clip. If I click the drop down box, you have three options: blur, color, and style. I'm going to go ahead and click blur, and then from here you have multiple selections, which basically are a increased blurred version of the clip you've got in your player head. If I click on the second option here, I want you to have a look at the clip over in the media player. If I scrub this clip, you now can see we have a blurred version of the clip as the background rather than the two black bars we've had previously. And you can go ahead and perhaps choose the option for it to be slightly unblurred or extremely blurred. And then of course, if you hit the drop down menu again, you have color, so you can go ahead and change different colors on your background. And in a similar fashion, if you hit the drop down menu, hit style, you can go ahead and perhaps add a fancy style. From a creative standpoint, I don't necessarily see me using this in any scenario. Maybe, and it's a very low probability, I will use the canvas to add a blur effect background, as you can see here. But 9 times out of 10, I'll always prefer to opt in getting the full image on the entire screen. Of course, this sometimes can be an issue in terms of quality. However, I would much rather try and find another clip to use with better quality than using the canvas effect. Of course, as always, this is down to your creativity and your flair when creating your content. For this next lesson, I want to show you a function called chroma key. Now, for me to be able to do this, I need to go ahead and open a new project and import a particular file. And to do that, I'm just simply going to go ahead and hit File, New Project. Click on OK. Over in my media panel, I'm going to go ahead and import a file that I've downloaded online. If I play this video, you can see that we have two shades of green, one on the background and one on the phone. I want to show you how we can remove these particular greens, allowing us to put a different background or perhaps insert a screen recording within the phone. So the very first thing is I'm going to drag the clip onto our timeline, and with the clip selected over in our adjustment panel at the top, we have basic, cutout, mask, and enhance. What I want to go ahead and do is click on cutout and check chroma key. This will give you the option to click on the color picker, and from there you can just go ahead and select any color on the screen. And as we all know, by default, green seems to be the key color you want to use when it comes to chroma key. Therefore, if for example you have a production setup with a green screen background, this will allow you to remove it. So I'm going to start with the actual background of this by clicking on the background in the video player. And now you can see on our adjustment panel, we've got the color selected and we've been given two options, which is the strength and shadow. If I drag the strength across, and I didn't need to drag it too much, straight away the background has gone. We can, however, see slight shades of green on the outer rim of the phone and the fingers. So this is where I would start being much more careful with the strength I'm inputting. And rather than dragging the slider, I'll just go ahead and click up or down on the manual adjustment. So I think we get a good look at around about 10 or 11. And now back in my timeline panel, if I just scrub across the video, we can see that the background has been removed completely. So from here, we could easily easily go ahead and move this clip up on another timeline and bring a clip underneath, which will then be shown where the current chroma key is applied. I'll just quickly go ahead and undo this by hitting Command Z. And what I actually want to show you is how we can also use the color picker just by simply selecting on the color picker icon and clicking on the screen itself to then remove the screen on the phone. And this time I'm going to go ahead and insert a video underneath this clip to show you how this would look like. So over in our media panel, I'm going to hit import and bring another clip into our project. Using the clip we've seen previously of Andrew Tate doing the shoulder press with the dumbbells, I'm going to drag this into our main clip. And straight away you can see that the clip itself is now only appearing in the phone. And the very first thing I want to do is click on this clip, go back into basic and readjust the size and the position of this clip. So from here, I now want to tweak the chroma key settings to ensure we remove this noise around the phone case. So to do this, click on your green screen clip, back over in cutout, and then what you want to do is start playing around with the shadow. So I'm going to increase the shadow quite a bit. I may also increase the strength slightly. And there you have it. We have now managed to insert a clip of Andrew Tate on a phone using the chroma key. Of course, when you're doing this, you want to make sure that you play around with the strength and shadow. Keep using the color picker until you've got an absolute flush version whereby you've reduced the noise around the fingertips, ensuring you've managed to execute a very clean chroma key effect. Now, with that being said, there are some limitations to CapCut. As you all know, this is a free editing software. In comparison to something like Adobe Premiere Pro, you would have much more control to the point where you could start shaping exactly how you want to feather out the green. But nevertheless, CapCut does do an amazing job if you need to use the chroma key in your content creation. I've heard you all subconsciously say in the previous lesson, well, what if I don't have a video with a green screen? Well, there's also a solution for that. So what I've done here is pulled a particular clip, and what I simply can go ahead and do is click on cutout in our adjustment panel. Where we normally have our chroma key section, we also have auto cutout. So if we select this or turn it on, you'll see that it starts to process and we actually have removed the background from the video. Now, once again, I will say that it is okay. It can be used. However, I still do find it suboptimal, especially when you're as meticulous as me when it comes to editing. So things like this where you can still see some of the background wouldn't necessarily be good enough for me. However, it still is another effect that's worth recognizing. And for some of you that have just embarked on this creative journey, it's really good for a beginner tool. In this lesson, I'm starting with a fresh project, and what I'm going to go ahead and do is upload a clip that I have of Big Bro Dylan. So in the media player, I'm going to go ahead and hit import, and I've now got my clip of Big Bro Dylan in a particular interview. And rather than scrubbing through it on the media player, which I can go ahead and do, I'm just going to quickly drag this onto the timeline, zoom in, and let's go ahead and pick a particular section. Once I've got my playhead to the area that I'm happy with, I'm just going to split the clip by hitting either Command B, Control B, or this particular icon on the left hand side. I'll go ahead and delete the rest of the clip. So I now have the particular clip that I want to work with. And this is just a clip of Dylan's interview with Jay Waller.
Came from the South, obviously, and I was looking around, I was like, man, there's got to be more to life than this.
What I'd like to do in this lesson is show you a cool effect. However, within this lesson, you'll also pick up how to compound a clip and how to add text. So the very first thing we're going to go ahead and do is copy this clip. And I'm going to do this by right-clicking, going over and hitting copy. Of course, you can hit Command C, Control C, whatever your options are. Then from there, I'm going to right click on the timeline and hit paste. Drag this so it's on top of the clip. Now, what we have is two of the exact same clips on top of one another. And the clip that's at the top, I'm going to click on it and make sure over in the adjustment panel section, I go over to cutout and I click auto cutout. This will now begin processing the clip, and what we've got is currently two clips that are on top of one another, both identical. However, if I hide the clip beneath, you'll see that we've got a cutout on the clip on top. So from here, I want to add text. Now, this is extremely simple. Over in the media panel, you can see you've got a variety of options. You've got audio, text, stickers, effects, transition, filters, and adjustments. At this present moment, I'm going to hit text, and I have an option for default text. I'm going to drag this onto the timeline, and you can see now we have a default text box which I can drag across to fit my entire clip. On the player, we now can see our default text. So if I double click on this, I can go ahead and change this to Money Bag Dylan. I can reposition it by dragging the box. And one of the cool things about CapCut is it allows you to get different preset styles. So as you can see here in the adjustment panel, there's a whole bunch of preset styles that you can go ahead and use. And with the text selected, you can play around with different preset styles such as bubble and effects. This allows you to put particular effects on your text. So what I'm going to do here is first go over to basic. I'm going to pick a particular preset and style. Quite like this one. I think it suits Dylan. And then from there, I'm going to head over to effects, try and pick something that looks pretty cool. Okay, so I think I'm happy with this one. I'm going to position it a bit further up. And perhaps I'll put money bag as one word. Of course, you can go ahead into basic and you can play around with all the different functions that are available. For example, you can change the position inside, the opacity, the stroke, background, color, all of that good stuff. I just want to get the particular lesson across to you, but this should allow you to create text into your videos. From here, what I'm going to go ahead and do is highlight the text layer on the timeline, and at the same time, also hide the layer underneath. To do this, I'm going to hold on Command. I believe for those of you who are Windows users, it will be Control. Click on the clip underneath, and I now have both the text and the clip underneath highlighted. Right click and create compound clip. Now, when I click create compound clip, this is very similar to nesting a sequence together. The cool thing about this is when I do click it, you'll notice that the text is now behind Dylan. So this is a really cool and simple way to get text behind your character or your person that you may be editing. And of course, it also applies to images. It also applies to whatever you want to put instead of the default text layer. Super simple lesson. However, in this lesson, we've identified 3 things: the ability to put things behind a particular clip or subject, the ability to create text, and the ability to create a compound clip. Another simple trick that you can use applying the same methodology as the previous lesson is to go ahead and have your clip duplicated on top of one another. And again, the clip at the top, go over to your adjustment panel, click on cut out. Then from there, auto cut. And as we know from the previous lesson, the cutout has been applied. And then from here, you want to click the bottom clip, go back over to basic. And what you can go ahead and do is scroll down to the bottom of your adjustment panel, turn on the canvas, and in the drop down menu, click blur. This will give you 4 options as mentioned in one of our previous lessons. If I click on the second option, which has a mild blur applied to it, scroll further up and reduce the opacity, you'll start to see I get a blurred background with Dylan in full HD. So this is another cool and simple trick if you want to go ahead and create a blurred background effect on your video. In this lesson, I'd like to talk about group and range. So currently we've got our clip of Dylan in the timeline. As you can see, we have the video and audio attached together. A really simple way of unlinking this is just right clicking on the video and clicking on extract audio. From there, we now have our video and audio on separate timelines. I'll just move Dylan's clip down onto the main track. And if for whatever reason you have a video or audio that is separate to one another and they're not grouped together, what you can basically do is highlight the 2 of them, right click and click on group. So the shortcut for that is Command G for me. Most likely any of you who are using Windows, it will be Control G. So if I click this, I now have both of them together. I can see on the timeline of the clip and audio, the words combo A. This identifies that both of these have been grouped together. So whatever I do to this particular clip, for example, trimming or extending the clip, it will happen to both the audio and the video. If for whatever reason I want to keep the audio but I want to trim the video, what you'd have to do is double click on the video, and then from there you can trim this down separately. Even though both the video and audio will still remain as a grouped clip. Again, I can do the same with the audio by double clicking on the audio and just dragging the audio down or increasing the audio depending on what I'd like to do. But that essentially allows you to group or pair particular videos and audio together and simultaneously be able to edit them individually if required. Now, there may also come a time where you want to work on a specific range or area of your sequence. And to do this, you'll just basically right click anywhere on the timeline and go over to range. You have an in point and out point. On the keyboard, it's I and O. So if I go ahead and click on the in point, I now have this area highlighted. I can move my playhead to whatever area of the clip I want as my out point. Again, I can either right click and go to range, or I can hit the alphabet letter O on my keyboard. And there we go. I now have this particular area that is highlighted. This is my range. If I was to export or import, it would only select this particular range. And of course, it makes it easier to work with because everything outside of this range has this sort of dull shade applied to it. So that's the lesson on group and range. These two tools come in handy depending on what content you are creating. In this lesson, I'd like to talk about masking. Personally, I feel like the masking ability within CapCut is suboptimal, and I'll explain to you why throughout this lesson. So the very first thing I want you to do is to select a particular clip. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and use this clip here we've got of the human anatomy. Whilst you have the clip selected, you want to go over to your adjustment panel and click on mask, which is located next to the basic and cutout option. And by clicking this, you can go ahead and check or turn on the mask function. Now, with the mask turned on, you have a variety of options. However, these are the only options that you actually have. So for example, if I want to go ahead and click on the split, you'll see that I now have a split mask or a film strip, circle, rectangle, heart shape and star shape. Let's quickly run through the features, and to do this I'll go ahead and just use a simple mask, which is the split mask. And on the player panel we have two buttons that are presented. The first you can go ahead and use to rotate what position you want your mask. So in this case I'm going to go ahead and use -90, and the second option acts as a feather. So if I pull this out, you can see that I'm starting to get a feather effect where I can see the background. And then lastly, you can hover your mouse over the white line and you could drag this to position where you want your mask. So in this case, let's move our player head right back to the start of this clip, and I'm going to position the mask towards the right hand side of the clip, and I want the mask to move over to the left hand side. And this is fairly simple to do. We just go ahead and keyframe in the position. Over in the adjustment panel, I can go ahead and click on the add keyframe, and over on the playhead I can scrub to position my playhead where I would like the mask to end. So with the playhead positioned correctly, I'm going to go ahead and move this mask all the way towards the end so you can no longer see the clip let go, and you'll notice a keyframe has automatically been added. So if I scrub the playhead back and forth, you can see that a mask has now been added to the clip. I also want to mention that the keyframe is added in a similar way to how we add any other keyframe animations to the clip. So now I've got multiple keyframes. You are not able to easily identify which keyframe sits with which animation. I know there's two keyframes, however, I have a third keyframe here, and that relates back to a different animation rather than the masking. Now, what we want to do is include a clip underneath that allows the mask to bring in that particular clip. To do this, we have to make sure our clip underneath is actually on the main timeline. So I'm just going to move and reposition these clips. And if I scrub from here, we can see the mask starting to move and the clip underneath being revealed, which is fine from a basic transition perspective. However, for those of you who are more advanced CC users, perhaps you use DaVinci Resolve, Final Cut Pro, or even Adobe Premiere Pro, you'll know that when using a mask, what you actually want to try and do is position the mask in a particular way. And as an example, I would actually cut my mask so it's around the right hand side of this anatomy clip, and therefore you can get a clean transition rather than this just being a split screen transition. And for me, that is the downfall of masking in CapCut, because the only options I have other than this is to produce a film strip style of masking or a circle, rectangle, heart and star. Nevertheless, there's the lesson on on masking in relation to CapCut. Of course, go ahead and apply some creativity, see what you can do. You could perhaps use the auto cut to single out a particular person and then mask the background. But me personally, I don't necessarily see the masking function within CapCut serving any great deal of purpose. For all the Professor Arnold fans, this is going to be an awesome lesson. There's a function within CapCut that allows you to enhance talking head videos. So currently on my timeline, I've got a talking head video of Arnold, and I'm just going to select a particular frame that we can play around with. With your clip selected on the timeline, you can go ahead over to the adjustment panel, and next to mask, you have the option enhance. If you click on enhance, you have a whole list of different options which you can use to play around with the talking head clip. So the very first thing I'm going to do is turn on the face option, and from here I have a drop down menu which allows me to select either single mode or multiple mode. Now within CapCut, I will say that this function works better on single mode, so a single talking head. And soon as I've selected it, you can see on our media player, CapCut has already tracked the face. So from here you have a variety of options such as even, smooth, brighten, white teeth, smiles, and dark circles. So if we was to increase the even option, I want you to go ahead and look closely at some of the wrinkles that Arnold might have. And if I push the even further, you can see they've started to smooth out or disappear. Another option is smooth, which allows you to kind of blur the face, or as CapCut would refer it to, smooth the face. You have a brighten option, so we can make Arnold even whiter, and a really cool option which is white teeth. If you look at the media player at Arnold's teeth, by increasing this, we can bump Arnold's teeth to almost look like he's visited the dentist and had his teeth whiten. It's probably best you don't use this function at 100%, simply because you can tell it looks quite fake. Around about 35 seems to suit Arnold quite well. And then of course you've got smile lines, so I want you to pay attention to these particular, not wrinkles, but definition that Arnold's got around his mouth. And if I pull this further, you can see them start to smooth or blend off. And also we've got dark circles, so around Arnold's eyes, the eye bag region, if I was to increase this, you can see the application starts to remove these. And of course we've got different skin tones, which we can change Arnold's skin tone color. And the great thing about CapCut is it does a fantastic job of auto tracking this on the head. So all the effects that we currently applied are now across the entirety of the video. From here, I'm going to turn off the face option, and we actually have another option called facial beauty. So if I turn this on, I'm now given a whole array of options to change Arnold's face. So perhaps I might want to change the chin length. I might want to change Arnold's cheekbones. I can even go ahead and change his hairline. Again, I'm going to switch the facial beauty off. And there's another mode here I want to explore with you, which is actually the makeup mode. So if I turn this on, I can go ahead and give Arnold a killer makeup look, which has now been applied across the video. So I'll turn off the makeup mode, and then you've also got the body mode. However, that's not applicable in this case because we are using a talking head video. However, if you do have someone that's a full body, you can go ahead and click this and play around with things like waist, head, etc. A really simple tool that you can use to enhance features on a talking head video. So go ahead and have a play around with this if you are editing talking head submissions or talking head videos in CapCut. Fundamentally, we need to understand that CapCut is a beginner editing software. Therefore, majority of the tools that we're given within this software have a click or drag and drop functionality. Now, whilst this is good for a beginner because it allows you to access particular styles, animation, adjustments fairly easy, for a more advanced editor, it's not necessarily the route you want to go down because it doesn't give you control. And this is something I hope you've understood as you progress through your path. Having control within your content creation is key. Now, with that being said, there's a very simple function within CapCut that allows you to apply animations. So with my clip selected, over on the top right hand side in the adjustment panel, above the basic cutout, mask and enhance functions, we also have video, audio, speed, animation and adjustment. I will eventually come on to audio, speed and adjustment, but for now let's go ahead and click on animation. What we now have is a variety of plug and play animations that we can use in our content creation. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the fade in animation. As you can see, this has added a fade in on the start of my video. It's worth noting that all of these particular animations are related to the in or the beginning of your content creation or beginning of the clip that you've selected. If I go ahead and click on out, which is next to in, I can find the fade out to match the fade in that I've put. So let's go ahead and click on this. And there we go. We now have a fade out, and at the beginning, we have a fade in. So just as simple as that, we can go ahead and add animations to the beginning and end of our clip. We can also click on the combo, which allows you to add animations throughout the entirety of the clip. So you'll target the in and out simultaneously. And it's also worth noting on the out and in animations, you can change the duration of your animation here at the bottom by just moving this slider along. So I can make the duration of my in 4 seconds.
Interesting stuff there. What I'll do is I'll show you mostly
and I can increase the duration of my out by 4 seconds.
Inject drama and sort of take it down a notch, and he manages to sort of...
So a really simple way of adding in animations. And of course, you can get creative with this. You could go ahead and split a clip, and at the starting of this clip, you could probably add an animation. Let's go ahead and click collision.
But wonderful people, but most of the content...
And you can add a pretty cool animation into your content creation. However, as you all know, one of the key things I am trying to teach all of the students here is that your animations should be used in a subtle manner. I don't necessarily think that the vast majority of animations that are offered by CapCut allow you to achieve this unless you have a deeper understanding of production. So, for example, if your camera or your particular clip is moving from left to right, and then the clip that you're going to join that with is also moving from left to right, you could, of course, add a pretty cool side slide transition, or maybe even a swipe right transition or a swipe left, zoom in, zoom out, depending on what you're trying to achieve with your content creation. So go ahead and explore the animations that you can add into your content creation. However, try to ensure that you do not litter your timeline full of animations because you think they are cool. Having a content creation with animations every 5 seconds, every different clip is actually a sign of a novice content creator. So try to make sure that when you do use your animation, 1, it is subtle, and 2, it's usually for that wow factor in your content creation piece. In our previous lesson, we discussed animations and how you could potentially use animations as transitions. So what better way to then progress onto actual transitions that are available within CapCut? And hopefully this will turn into a really good lesson on how transitions can make or break your content creation. So the very first thing you want to do is head over to the left media panel and click on transitions. This will now give you a library of readily available transitions. On the left hand side, you have trending, transitions, overlay, movement, blur, etc. You can go ahead and use any one of these. All you need to do is click on the download button. And of course, as you can see, if you hover over the transition, you can see what that transition will do on your timeline or on your clips. So if I just take my playhead and scrub it back to a particular point where I've got 2 clips together, we can use these 2 clips where I have young Leonidas walking through the snow, which then goes into him peering over his shoulder and spotting a wolf. I want to add a transition between these 2 clips. So the very first thing I'm going to do, just to make this a bit more clearer, is hide the human anatomy layer, and I'm going to do this by clicking the hide track icon on that particular track. So there we go. Now we can clearly see these 2 clips next to one another. So what you want to do is click on the clip that you want to add the transition to. And in this case, what I'm actually going to do is add a transition that I believe is not subtle and doesn't add value to my content creation. So I've got shake 3 here. And as you can see, it basically flips or shakes the screen towards the right in a 90-degree angle. And to add it on, all I need to do is go ahead and click on this plus sign, which will add the transition to the track. So I'll go ahead and click plus. And if you look over in the timeline, we now have this this CapCut sign and opacity box over the two clips. I can go ahead and change the duration of this clip. So bring your attention to the right panel or the adjustment panel, which now says transition, and you can adjust the duration by pulling on this slider, or in the timeline, you can actually drag and move the transition over. Let's go ahead and play this particular transition.
Absolute nothing. You start from zero.
So while some people may think this is a great transition, look at how it moves in a 90-degree angle and it shakes. That is not categorized as a great transition. The reason why is because the clip itself is not something that you want to bring a large amount of attention to, as it's not the focal point of this content creation, and it doesn't necessarily help with the narration or the story behind the clips. I'm going to go ahead and delete this transition simply by clicking on the transition and hitting delete. Now let's have a deeper look into the two clips. We've got Leonidas walking, which then transitions to this deep stare from Leonidas, almost fearless stare. What would actually work is if this clip almost zoomed or pulled in to the point of where Leonidas is looking. So I actually think there's a perfect transition in CapCut for this. So again, I'm going to click on the clip, and there is this particular transition in the trending section, which is called pull in. As you can see, it almost pulls the camera in, and I think this will work quite well. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the add to track icon, and you can see I've now got this on my timeline. Let's go ahead and have a quick scrub through this. That works pretty well, although I do feel that the pull happens a bit too early. And also, when Leonidas looks over, I may want this to happen slightly earlier. So to do this, I'm going to delete the transition. I'm going to go ahead and reposition this clip to the point where Leonidas just begins to look over. I'll reposition this clip, add back in the pull in transition. Let's have a quick look at that again. Right, that looks a lot better. I might actually go ahead and reduce the duration of the transition. Extremely subtle, but I think it works in a very effective manner. So let's go ahead and show the human anatomy track, and let's play this.
Like a video game. You start from absolute nothing. You start from zero. You have no
Perfect. Now what I'd probably do there is go ahead and find some type of subtle sound that would match that zoom or pull in. But that's the lessons on transition. So go ahead and have a play. Remember, your transitions are located in the media player on the top bar. You can find the panel for transitions. Within the adjustment panel, we also have an adjustment tab. This is related to color grading. So with your clip selected, if you go over to your adjustment panel and click on adjustment, you're now greeted by a variety of color grading options. So of course, you've got your basic. Then from there, you got your HSL, curves, and color wheel. Within your basic, you have the option to add a LUT. For those of you who do not understand what a LUT is, do not worry. At a really high level, this is essentially color grading packs that you can download online, and then from there you can click on the drop down menu and select a particular LUT, and then from there you can go ahead and decide how much strength that LUT or color grading pack is applied to your clip. This is not something I plan to go in depth on in this particular CapCut crash course. I just wanted to let you know that that option is there. So within the basic settings, you have your usual options for color grading. Of course, you can play around with the temperature, the hue, saturation, brightness, contrast, highlight, shadow, illumination, sharpen, particles, fade, and vignettes. I think on this particular clip, I'd like to decrease the number in relation to shadow. This actually will give me an effect where the clip itself comes across much darker. Of course, we also have the option to play around with the HSL. So if there's any reds in your clip, you can go ahead and click on red, play around with the hue, saturation, brightness, same with orange, yellow, green, so on and so forth. We also have the option to adjust the curve. So we've got the Luma curve, which will allow you to again play around with the brightness. So as you can see here, I've increased the amount of brightness that is on Leonidas's face and then decreased the amount of darkness. Doesn't really look that good, so I'll just hit Command Z and restore this back to normal. And in a very similar manner, you have the options to play around with the red, green, and blue curves. Then finally, you have your color wheel. So this is more advanced color grading, as with the curves and HSL. Majority of you should be using basic, especially if you're using a program such as CapCut. However, I don't want to downplay CapCut's ability. I'd like to say that the options that they're giving in relation to color grading is actually pretty good, considering this is a free editing software. So again, you can steer the shadows towards a more deeper or richer color, and you can do this with the middle gray, tint, offset, etc. Now, with that being said, what we're actually doing here is color grading, or as CapCut likes to refer it to, as adjustment on the actual clip. This is not the way I go about color grading or adding any level of adjustment. Usually, what I prefer to do is have an adjustment panel or adjustment track. To do this, all you simply need to do is go over to your media panel, and towards the top of the bar, you'll find the option adjustment. If you click on this, you'll have customize and LUT. In our case, we want to go ahead and click on customize. If you hover over the black box, you will get a add to track icon. Click this, and straight away you'll notice on your track you now have adjustment 1. This is an adjustment layer that is only for color grading. So now I can expand this, I can reduce it, I can position it wherever I want over a particular clip. For some reason, I feel like this clip has some type of shadow tint applied to it. Let me just get that back to 0. There we go. Click back on the adjustment layer, and we have exactly the same tools we've talked about previously. I might want to reduce the amount of fade. If I pull this to an exaggerated amount, such as 40, and move my playhead across the entire clip, you can see that the adjustment layer has applied that particular color grading fade across the entirety of my project. If I reduce the adjustment panel, you can now see it's only applied on that clip. If I hide the track, it'll remove the adjustment panel. So it's worth noting that if you are going to go down the route of applying some type of color grading, make sure you include an adjustment panel, and then from there color grade. With that being said, for a lot of you, you might not be able to color grade that great just yet. If I remove my adjustment track and head over to my media panel, on the top bar we have an option called filters. If you click on this, within CapCut you have a whole set of features, almost like LUTs, preloaded color grading that you can just apply directly to your timeline. So let's pick something extremely obvious that we can tell straight away, such as Barbie. I'm going to click on download.
You have no intrinsic value, and it's up to you.
And then from there, I'll get the option to add track. If I click this, you'll see I now have a track which is called Barbie on my timeline. If I position this over the video clip we're looking at, we can see we get this purpley pink style of tint added to the clip automatically. Obviously, it's not a type of filter or color grade that we would go with, so I'm going to delete that, and instead I'm going to go ahead and perhaps look at some of the filters related to portraits, where by scrolling down, I'm able to find this night scene, in particular black ice filter, which I think could go pretty well with the clip that I've got.
0, you have no intrinsic value, and it's up to you.
So I'll go ahead and add to track. I now have this black ice filter on my timeline, and as you can see, it does work well, but it seems to be quite strong. So with the black ice filter highlighted over in my adjustment panel, you now can see we can adjust the amount of strength the filter applies to our clip. So just by dragging this, I want to get it to the point where it just slightly comes into play. So around about 50. And if you really want to get detailed with this, you can go ahead and add keyframes. So maybe at the start of the clip, I actually keyframe the clip at 100 strength. And if I drag across to the point where Leonidas looks over, I can now keyframe this at perhaps 60. A few frames further down, I'll keyframe at 50. And there we have it. That looks pretty decent. Let's have a quick look at this.
Absolute nothing. You start from 0. You have no intrinsic value.
So, super useful tools presented to you by CapCut. Make sure you use them, adjustments and filters. In the following lessons, I want to touch on audio. Now, the very first feature within CapCut that I find quite impressive is the voiceover feature. So within your timeline, if you look towards the top right-hand corner, there is an image or a mic icon. If you go ahead and click on this, a pop-up box will appear which allows you to record your voice directly into the app. Now, you can do this by hitting the red circle icon to start recording. Underneath this, you have your dB levels, and then from there you have your input, and you could choose which microphone you want to use to record your audio, adjust your volume, you have echo reduction and mute project. What you want to do when recording a voiceover is turn on the mute project, and then from there you can go ahead and click record and speak into your mic. What this will actually do is allow you to record directly on top of your edit. And this feature is really cool for those of you who may be interested in providing a review on top of a talking head like a podcast, or maybe you're reviewing a music video, I don't know. But this CapCut feature is pretty cool, so go ahead and play around with it if you want to place a voiceover on top of your edit. I believe in one of the previous lessons I've mentioned how to extract audio. However, it's worth me going into a bit more detail on this. And you all should know by now, if you're using CapCut, all you need to do to extract audio is right click on your clip, go down and click extract audio. When you click on this, you'll notice the audio is now extracted and is on its own soundtrack. I'm just going to go ahead and hit Command Z to remove that particular separation. However, there is a really cool way to get your audio back. And what do I mean by this? I mean, if for some reason you have extracted your audio and you delete it, or perhaps you only drag the video onto your timeline, what you can actually do is bring your audio back into the clip. So in our timeline on this particular clip here of the punching bag clip, we can see clearly that there's no audio associated to the video. So if I right click on the clip, what I can go ahead and do is click on recover audio. So when I click this, you'll notice straight away an audio has appeared back under the video. And of course, from here, I can right click and extract the audio back out. There's also another feature worth mentioning within CapCut, very similar to how you have transition presets. If you go over to the media panel, next to media, you have a button called audio. So if you click on this, what you now have are multiple music soundtracks. And then underneath this, you have sound effects. And if I click on this again, I now have a drop down of several different styles of sound effects I can apply into my edit. For me, the main one being transitions, as I tend to use the swish, whoosh, remembering whoosh, etc. sound effects quite frequently. So all you actually need to do is hit download and preview the sound, and then if you click on the add to track or plus button, you'll notice on my timeline I now have this SFX added, which is a really cool feature, very similar to how you can apply transitions and filters that are preloaded into CapCut, and it can save you time compared to a lot of the paid editing software, as all the edits that I do which are not in CapCut, I usually have to go and find a particular SFX sound on the internet, which can take quite a lot of time. When you have your audio extracted, if you click on your audio over in the adjustment panel, you are greeted by a new set of options. These options are there for you to edit your audio. So we have the basic things like volume adjustment. You can add a fade in and fade out to your audio. You also have the option to click on noise reduction. And of course, this is great if you've got any audio with any background noise that you want removing. And then we have the option to turn on channels. I'm going to go over this in a little bit more detail because I think this is fairly important, and I think a lot of you may encounter this. So if for some reason you are listening to your audio back and it appears like the sound is coming from either just the left speaker or the right speaker, and you can identify this by playing your content creation and paying attention to this graphic here in the player panel. This is a dB indicator. So if you start to see only the left speaker indicator playing or only the right indicator playing, and let me just quickly play my timeline so you can have a look at what this indicator looks like.
You start from zero. You have no intrinsic value, and it's up to you to level up your skill.
What that essentially means is the audio currently is coming out from both speakers, but if it's only on one side, then over in the adjustment panel under channels, if you hit the drop down menu, you can either fill right with left and fill left with right. So if audio is only coming out of your left speaker, then you can fill right. And if audio is only coming out your right speaker, then you can fill left. And this will balance out the audio across both speakers. It's a really good and simple function. It's worth knowing. Then from there, we also have next to basic voice effects. So if I click on this, I'm now greeted by multiple voice effects. I can have voice characters and voice filters. So depending on what you might want to do with your audio, you might want to include a echo from a voice filter perspective, or from a voice character perspective, you may want to change the voice into a robot or distorted voice. So again, very similar to how you would use transitions or audio. You would download, preview, and then add to your audio. So those are some really cool and simple features when editing audio. Remember, G's, when editing your content creation, audio is king. Try to pay as much attention as possible to the narrative, to the music, add SFX that are relevant in the correct places and correct positions. Audio can truly make or break your content creation. One of the great things about CapCut, and the reason why I advocate for this as a beginner editing software, is because a lot of the functionality is extremely simple, as we've seen with the audio, as we've seen with transitions, as we've seen with animations. Now, this is also the case when it comes to speed. So in my timeline, I currently have a clip of a waterfall. This is actually in slow motion. So if I hit play, you can see that the waterfall is in slow motion. So what I want to do is add some speed or some speed ramping to this particular clip. And to do this, all you need to do is, with the clip highlighted, go over to your adjustment panel, and at the top where you've got video audio, you also have speed. If I click on speed, there's something I want you to notice straight away. Beside the fact that we now have different options in our adjustment panel, over in our timeline, the clip itself, towards the top, we have a toggle that we can drag. And as you can see, we've currently got this at 1x. So if I was to pull this down, I'm now increasing the speed, or the overall speed of the entire clip, and I can drag it all the way down to 2x. This now means that this clip is actually moving a lot faster. In fact, 2x faster. You can also do this over in the adjustment panel. So if I drag this back to its original place, which was 1x, over in the adjustment panel where it says times, we can drag this slider to increase or decrease the amount of time the clip takes. So I can push it down to half, which is 0.5x. Or what I can actually do is change the duration of the clip, so how long the clip actually is. And let's just say we take this all the way to 49 seconds. And as you can see, it's applied the speed transformation automatically. It's a 0.2x if we want the clip at approximately 49 seconds. What you start to realize is when you do play around time and speed, especially when you're trying to slow down a clip, you will start to see a jitter effect occurring across your clip. So if I move this down to 0.6, you'll see if I play this clip, it's not as smooth as you would want it. And what CapCut allows you to do is click on this smooth slow-mo. So if I turn this on, I'm now greeted, firstly, the processing that is occurring to the clip, because I've currently got it set on frame blending. However, I personally find that with optical flow, you get a much better quality, as it says there. However, the processing for the clip does take longer. So let's go ahead and hit optical flow. Now I've got the smooth slow-mo applied. This took approximately 1 to 2 minutes. This usually depends entirely on your operating system and how quick it can process the slow mode. So if I go ahead and play this, you can see that the slow mode itself is a lot smoother, which is great. However, the clip itself is already in slow motion. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is undo all the settings that I've currently went through, and I now have my clip inserted into my timeline at its original speed, which is slow-mo. And what I want to do now is jump into the next lesson where we're going to talk about the curve function, which will allow you to create speed ramps, speed things up, slow them down, and do it in a particular way, or use particular curves that are already outlined and given to you by CapCut. In this lesson, I want to explore the speed curve function within CapCut. I find it extremely beneficial for those of you who are new video editors, or even if you're using CapCut as your free editing option. So with the clip selected and in our adjustment panel, we have clicked on speed. We can now click on curve, which is next to the normal function. By clicking on this, we are now greeted by several curves. The one that everybody should be familiar with is the montage. montage, which essentially is your clip speeds up, then speeds back down, and then goes back into its original time. It's something that I use extremely frequently with a lot of my content creation. Of course, we've also got hero time, bullet, jump cut, flash in, and flash out. You also have the option to click on the customize, which then allows you to create your own curve. But for the sake of this particular lesson, I'm going to go ahead and click on montage, and I'm now presented with a curve graph. I must say, I genuinely like this functionality. I wish this was in more advanced or paid subscription-based editing software, but nevertheless, the montage has now automatically been applied to our clip. So if we focus our attention onto our clip in the timeline, we can see the speed has been applied to this top bar, and each intersection represents the intersection on the curve. Let me try and explain that for you in a little bit more detail. If I drag my playhead across, I want you to also notice in the top adjustment panel, you've also got a playhead which shows where the clip aligns. Now, if I just drag this across quite quickly, you can see both playheads moving succinctly. Let's go ahead and play this clip. So you can see it slowly starts, ramps up, and then comes back down and then levels out. If I was personally editing this clip into a content creation, I don't feel I would actually need to change any of this. The montage itself is quite good. However, for the sake of learning, I'm going to show you how you can adapt and change the curve. Over in our graph, if you click on these particular bullet points or areas of focus, you can reposition them where you believe it might be more suitable. So I actually feel like if I was going to do any tweaking on this, I'd make the ramp up in speed start a lot later, and I'd probably push the ramp even higher. And to do this, you can literally just take one of the ends and pull it up so the ramp is quite high. And then as a general learning principle or creative principle, you always want the ramp to match either side, so you get this smooth ramp up and then back down. And from this, you should be able to tell that you essentially can go ahead and move different points of speed across this graph. So let's go ahead and play this and see how that now looks. The slow video should ramp up fairly quickly and come back down and then level out. I think that's great. I could probably extend the ramp even more so the speed lasts for a longer duration. However, that's down to your creativity. It's down to your content creation and however you want to play it. I'm going to go ahead and hit Command Z on all of this. And what I actually want to do is just quickly click on customize. And from there, you'll essentially get a flat line curve. And what that means is no speed ramps or any changes in the image have been applied. However, you have the option to do it yourself manually. Of course, you can go ahead and just drag clips up in a different section. You can reposition it. And if you feel like you've done something that you're not necessarily happy with, you can go ahead and click on the redo button. And then from there, it'll go back to your previous setting. Now, you might be wondering, well, I've only got 3 areas which I can adjust on. So 1, 2, and 3. What you can do is position your playhead in a particular area that you're interested in and just go ahead and click on the plus icon. This will now give you another point of interest, another area in which you can manipulate the time. So I can ramp that up and then I can come to this second point, ramp it down, ramp it all the way back up again and bring it all the way back down for a flat line. Let's go ahead and play that. Okay, doesn't look that great. You could probably go ahead and hit smooth slow-mo, again switch to optical blending, and then from there try and have a look at the effect you've applied. But as a general rule of thumb, G's, flash in and flash out tend to work quite well. However, if you're going for the ultimate speed ramp, go with montage. In this lesson, I'd like to talk about adding text. If memory serves me correct, this initial segment that I've got here, I believe the text that we need to add or the narration that is being said by Andrew Tate is something along the lines of, life is not a walk in the park. But let's go ahead and have a quick listen.
Life as a man is not a walk in the park. It's like...
So what I actually say is life as a man is not a walk in the park. Now, in order to add text, what I want to do is go over to my media panel, and next to audio, we have the option to click text. If I go ahead and click this, I'm now greeted by a host of options, but at this moment I'm just going to go ahead and click on default text. So I'll hit the plus icon to add to track, and as you can see, I now have on my timeline this track called default text, and over in my adjustment panel I have all sorts of features which I will go over shortly. So let's go ahead and condense this particular track just to cover the section that we're interested in. Over in the player panel you can see we have default text written, and in the adjustment panel I'm just going to highlight highlight the text and change this to what the narration actually is. Life as a man. And to be honest with you, because we're doing a vertical video, I would never advocate for adding more than 1 to 5 words. Generally, you want your subtitles on one line. Therefore, what we want to do is move our playhead to the point where this particular sentence has already been said.
Life as a man,
which is around about here. Now, what I'm going to do is split this text track just by clicking the split function, or you can go ahead and hit Command B or Control B. Now, that allows us to have 2 separate default text layers on the same track. So at this point, I want to change the text to "is not a walk," and then I'm going to do the same with the remainder of the narration.
life as a man is not a walk in the park. It's like,
So here we go. "Is not a walk in the park." At this point, I want to start going into the variety of features we have within the adjustment panel related to text. So with my text highlighted, I can change the font size. I can go ahead and change the style, the color, character. I can even go ahead and add a preset style, which changes the background. It might change the text, add a stroke. All of these different varieties you can go ahead and check out for yourself. I quite like this one. And then from there, you can also change the position, which relates to where the text is on your clip. And you can also do this just by clicking and dragging the text itself. I'm going to leave it centered. You could change the blend mode. You can change whether you want a stroke or not. You can add a background, which then gives you a further set of options. You can add a glow, shadow, all that great stuff to enhance your text. Now, with that being said, I actually want my text all to be in capitals. So I'm going to go ahead and make that adjustment. Notice how each of these do not have the new settings applied. And what you actually need to do is highlight all the layers in your timeline and then go ahead and apply the settings that you want. And there you have it. We now have added text to our video. We've added a preset style. Of course, it's entirely up to you what you want to do with your text. Over in the adjustment panel, you can also click on font and then choose a variety of fonts that might suit your particular creation. I quite like this font, which is Atomic Maker. And what I now want to do is bring some animation to this text. And to do this, it's fairly simple within CapCut. You can either, in the adjustment panel, move over to effects or bubble. I don't necessarily recommend bubble. As you can see, not really my style. So I'm just going to hit the default on that. However, if you go over to effects, you now have a variety of effects that you can add to your art. And again, this relates to your creativity. You may not necessarily want to use an effects preset. However, some of them are decent. I'm going to go ahead and go with this particular style here. And then over in my media panel, you have another button called effects, which does essentially the same thing. At this point, I'm relatively happy with how the text looks like. But as I've mentioned, I want to bring some type of animation into this. So with the text layer highlighted, over in the adjustment panel next to text, I have animation. So if I go ahead and click on animation, you are all familiar now with how animation or how the drag and drop system is in CapCut. It is really cool. And from here, you can go ahead and check different styles, different trends. Again, as you all know, I like to keep things fairly subtle. So I've got a fade in animation here. So if I just download this and apply this onto my clip, you can see over in my text layer, we now have the animation applied to it. So there we go. We've got this very subtle fade in of the words. Now, again, in order to have this applied across the entirety of my text layers, I need to highlight them all, go back into animation, and then apply the fade in animation. Okay, fast forward a few minutes. I've gone ahead and applied everything I've just shown you across 5 to 6 seconds of the clip, just so you can go ahead and see what it looks like. So let's go ahead and hit play.
life as a man is not a walk in the park. It's like a video game. You start from absolute nothing. You start from zero. You have
And there you go. That is how you would add text, add some effects to those texts, whether it's a preset, whether it's you playing around and creating your own style for the text, and how you can go ahead and add some type of animation to the text. So at this point, I now have added text across the entirety of the project so far. However, there's another way to add animation or a style of text by using default options within CapCut. So what I'm actually going to go ahead and do is hide this particular text track that I have just by clicking on the eye icon in the timeline. And then over in our media panel with text selected, we have an option called text template. Now, what this essentially allows you to do is use a whole host of preloaded text templates that have their own animation and own style added to it. So for example, if I go ahead and hit on chapter, we have a few options that we can hover over and see which we may like. None of these are necessarily something I'd use, so let's just go ahead and have a play around and see if I can spot something that I would actually use and might match some of the creativity that I've got. I quite like this one here called sci-fi. Let's go ahead and add this to track, and as you now see, I've got a text track layer called drama sci-fi. I'm just going to quickly drag this over to the very beginning of our content creation, and if I scrub on the timeline, you can see we now have this particular effect. I do like it, however it may be a bit OTT for what we're trying to do here. I just want to quickly show you that this is an option. With the text template highlighted on your timeline over in the adjustment panel, you now have a variety of tools allowing you to edit what's on the screen. So what I'll do is use this as an intro or a text title. So I'm gonna give the project a name and let's call it The Game. I'm just going to quickly reduce the scale of this. So it's called The Game, and I think there's a word underneath called drama, and what I'll actually write is Life as a Man. And if you click underneath these particular sections on the drop bar, what you'll actually have is very similar options to when we add a blank text option. I don't necessarily like the gaps in between the lines themselves, and I can reduce this by just bringing the character size down to perhaps 30. This then should allow me to increase the font to 20. Again, I still feel like that's quite big, so I'm going to do this manually on screen in the media player and move this right in position. And if I unhide the previous text that I've written, we've now got a pretty cool title. But I'm also starting to feel now that the text is quite overpowering that we've got underneath compared to the title. And we can go ahead and have a look at that shortly. But let's just quickly finish our title. So I'm going to hide the text track, click back on our title. I feel like this should be bold. I'm relatively happy with this. However, I do think this could perhaps be shorter. So I'm going to go into my timeline, just drag this back over. Let's unhide the text and start playing around with the text that we actually have currently, as I do feel it's quite overwhelming compared to the title. So the first thing I'm going to do is highlight all of this text. And I suppose one of the things that come to mind is reduce the opacity on the text just where the title is. So it seems like 35 or maybe even 30 works quite well. Okay, so what I've actually done here is I've repositioned the 3 subtitles beneath the title, which I've also repositioned in the middle. Let's go ahead and give this a watch.
Life as a man is not a walk in the park. It's like a video game. You start from absolute nothing. You start from zero. You have no intrinsic value, and it's up to you to level up your skills. You work on your fitness, your fighting skills.
I'm quite happy with that, although I do think I would finesse this even further, and maybe a recommendation would actually be to remove the 3 subtitles in its entirety, leave the title headed in, and then move over to the subtitles. That can work as well. What I wanted to get across is the ability to add templates over in the media panel just by clicking on text and then text template. There's a whole host of preloaded templates you can use. You can use them as subtitles, you can use them as titles, graphics, motions, whatever you want to use them for. Go ahead and explore. Let's get into the lesson that a lot of you have been waiting for, which is auto caption. Now, for many of you, it's a bit of a painstaking process to write out each individual narration as text. So what you can go ahead and do is go over to your media panel, and back in the text option, we also have the auto captions option. So if I go ahead and click on this, we are greeted by an auto caption screen, which if we go ahead and hit create, CapCut will now start creating captions based on the audio narrative we have within the timeline. We now have caption layers applied to our timeline. With everything already highlighted, we could straight away use the same tools in the adjustment layer. So for example, I can click on the font and change this into automatic marker. I'll go ahead and add the same preset style, increase the font size, and then reposition this in the middle. So if I scrub through the timeline, I now have text automatically added to my video.
Life as a man is not not a walk in the park. It's like a video game. You start from absolute nothing. You start from zero. You have no intrinsic value, and it's up to you to level up your skills. You work on your fitness, your fighting skills.
And it does a relatively good job. If you want to ensure your captions stay on one line, then you have to go into the process we outlined in the previous lesson, such as splitting the particular layer and then removing parts of the word. But this is entirely up to you. It's a great feature to have, and it's pretty much the norm across all editing software tools. Auto caption is available on CapCut, DaVinci Resolve, Final Cut Pro, and Premiere Pro. With that being said, this concludes our lessons on text.